The medicine bottle felt cold against Genevieve Zimmer's palm as she slipped it beneath her shawl, her heart hammering so hard she thought the entire store might hear it echo off the wooden walls. The afternoon sun of August 1885 blazed through the dusty windows of Morrison's General Store in Rock Springs, Wyoming, casting long shadows across shelves stocked with everything from canned peaches to ammunition. And Genevieve knew she had mere seconds before old Mr. Morrison turned back around from sorting his ledgers at the counter. Her little brother Thomas had been coughing blood for 3 days now, his 7-year-old body burning with fever that made her want to weep every time she pressed her hand to his forehead. And this bottle of laudanum was the only thing standing between him and a grave beside their parents in the windswept cemetery on the edge of town. She had counted her coins 17 times that morning, spreading them across the warped floorboards of the one-room shack where she and Thomas lived alone, since consumption had taken their mother 6 months after their father died in a mining accident. $3.42 was all she had left in the world, and the medicine cost $5. 5 whole dollars that might as well have been 500 for all the hope she had of earning it before Thomas's condition worsened beyond saving. Her fingers trembled as she turned toward the door, careful to keep her footsteps light, her breath shallow, her entire body tense with the awful knowledge that she was stealing and that stealing was wrong, but that letting Thomas die when she could prevent it was more wrong still. "Miss, I believe you forgot to pay for something." The voice came from behind her, deep and steady and tinged with something that was not quite accusation but not quite neutrality either. Genevieve froze with her hand on the door handle, her stomach dropping like a stone into dark water. She turned slowly, expecting to see Mr. Morrison's weathered face twisted with anger, already imagining the sheriff hauling her away while Thomas died alone and afraid. Instead, she found herself looking into the bluest eyes she had ever seen, set in a sun-bronzed face beneath a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed features that were handsome in a rough, lived-in way. The man stood near the counter, tall and lean in dusty denim and a brown leather vest, his expression unreadable but not unkind. "I do not know what you mean," Genevieve said, and hated how her voice shook, how obvious the lie sounded even to her own ears. The cowboy tilted his head slightly, studying her with an intensity that made her feel like he could see straight through her threadbare dress and borrowed shawl to the terrified girl beneath. "The medicine under your shawl," he said quietly, pitched low enough that Mr. Morrison, who had gone into the back room, would not hear. "I reckon you need it pretty badly to risk stealing it." Tears sprang to Genevieve's eyes before she could stop them, hot and humiliating. "My brother is sick," she whispered. "He is only 7 and he has been coughing blood, and I do not have enough money and I do not know what else to do." The words tumbled out in a desperate rush, her pride crumbling like sun-dried clay. "Please, I will pay it back. I swear I will. But I need it now, today, because if I wait another week to earn the money, he might be dead." The cowboy's expression softened, something like understanding or perhaps memory flickering across his features. He stepped closer, moving with the easy grace of someone comfortable in his own skin, and when he spoke again his voice was gentler. "How much does it cost?" $5, Genevieve said miserably. "I have $3.42. Without another word, the cowboy reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn leather wallet. He extracted several bills and coins, then walked to the counter just as Mr. Morrison emerged from the back room carrying a crate of tinned goods. "Morrison, the young lady would like to purchase that bottle of laudanum," the cowboy said, placing the money on the scarred wooden counter. $5, correct, Mr. Morrison's bushy eyebrows rose as he looked from the cowboy to Genevieve and back again. "That is right, Owen. Though I did not see her bring it up here." "She was just about to," the cowboy said smoothly. "Were you not, miss?" Genevieve nodded mutely, drawing the bottle from beneath her shawl with shaking hands and setting it on the counter. Mr. Morrison counted the money, wrapped the bottle in brown paper, and handed it to her with a grunt that might have been curiosity or dismissal. The cowboy tipped his hat to the shopkeeper and held the door open for Genevieve, following her out into the blazing heat of the late summer afternoon. The street outside was dusty and crowded with the usual afternoon traffic of Rock Springs. Miners and railroad workers and Chinese laborers moving between buildings, horses and wagons kicking up clouds of Wyoming dust that hung golden in the slanting sunlight. Genevieve clutched the wrapped medicine to her chest and turned to face her unlikely savior, words failing her for a long moment as she tried to comprehend what had just happened. "Thank you," she finally managed, her voice thick with emotion. "I do not know how to thank you enough. You saved my brother's life." The cowboy shrugged, but there was kindness in his eyes. "Name is Owen Thatcher," he said, "and I have known what it is like to watch someone you love suffer when you cannot help them. Where do you live?" "About 3 miles outside of town," Genevieve said. "The old Henderson place, though it does not belong to the Hendersons anymore. We rent it." She did not mention that they were 2 months behind on rent, or that the landlord had threatened to evict them if she did not come up with the money soon. One crisis at a time. Owen glanced at the sky, then at the empty street in the direction Genevieve had indicated. "That is a fair walk in this heat, and you look about ready to drop. My horse is tied up at the saloon. Let me ride you home." "Oh, I could not impose," Genevieve protested, though exhaustion was already pulling at her limbs. She had been taking in laundry and mending to earn what money she could, working late into the night by candlelight, and she had not eaten anything but bread and weak coffee for 2 days. "You have already done so much." "It is not an imposition if I am offering," Owen said firmly. "Besides, I want to make sure that medicine gets to your brother as quick as possible. Come on." He started walking toward the saloon without waiting for her agreement, and after a moment's hesitation, Genevieve hurried to follow. She had to take 2 steps for every one of his long strides, her worn boots raising little puffs of dust with each footfall. Owen's horse turned out to be a handsome bay gelding with a white star on its forehead, tied to the hitching post outside the Lucky Dollar Saloon. The animal nickered softly as Owen approached, and he patted its neck with obvious affection. "This is Rusty," Owen said. "He is gentler than he looks." "Have you ridden before?" "Not often," Genevieve admitted. "My father had a mule when I was small, but we had to sell it after he died." "I am sorry for your loss," Owen said, and the words sounded genuine rather than perfunctory. He untied Rusty's reins and swung himself into the saddle with fluid ease, then reached down to her. "Give me your hand. I will pull you up behind me." Genevieve hesitated only a moment before placing her hand in his. His grip was warm and calloused and strong, and he lifted her as though she weighed nothing at all. She settled onto the horse behind the saddle, acutely aware of how close she was to this stranger, this man who had just saved her from jail and possibly saved Thomas's life. She did not know where to put her hands until Owen said, "You will want to hold on. Wrap your arms around my waist." Her face burning with embarrassment, Genevieve did as instructed, her arms encircling Owen's lean torso. She could feel the solid warmth of him through his shirt, could smell leather and horse and something like sage. Owen clicked his tongue and Rusty started forward at an easy walk, navigating the crowded street with practiced ease. Genevieve kept the wrapped medicine bottle pressed between them, her lifeline and Thomas's salvation. They rode in silence for a while, leaving the noise and bustle of Rock Springs behind them. The landscape opened up into the stark beauty of Wyoming in late summer, all golden grass and distant purple mountains beneath a sky so blue it almost hurt to look at. The heat was oppressive, but the movement created a slight breeze that was marginally cooler than standing still. Genevieve found herself relaxing despite the strangeness of the situation, lulled by the rhythmic motion of the horse and the steady presence of the man in front of her. "What is your name?" Owen asked after they had been riding for perhaps 10 minutes. "Genevieve Zimmer," she replied. "Everyone calls me Ginny, but I prefer Genevieve." "Genevieve it is, then," Owen said. "How long have you been taking care of your brother on your own?" 6 months, Genevieve said. "Our mother died of consumption in February. Our father died in a cave-in at the coal mine 2 years before that. There is no one else. No aunts or uncles or grandparents, at least none that we know of or that would take us in." "That is a heavy burden for someone your age," Owen observed. "How old are you, if you do not mind my asking?" 19, Genevieve said. "Old enough to work and provide for Thomas, but apparently not old enough to convince most of the respectable businesses in town to hire me. I take in laundry and mending, but it is not enough. It is never quite enough." She heard the bitterness in her own voice and wished she could take it back. This man had shown her nothing but kindness, and here she was complaining about her circumstances like some petulant child. But Owen did not seem offended. If anything, his voice held sympathy when he spoke again. "The world is not fair to women alone," he said. "Especially young women with responsibilities and no one to vouch for them. I have seen it before. My own mother struggled after my father was killed by Comanches when I was 12. She worked herself to death trying to keep me and my sisters fed, and she died when I was 16. I know what it is like." "I am sorry," Genevieve said softly. "What happened to your sisters?" "Married, both of them, to decent men who treat them well," Owen said, and there was satisfaction in his voice. "They live in Colorado now, have children of their own. I visit when I can, but I move around a lot for work." "What do you do?" Genevieve asked, grateful for the change of subject. "I am a ranch hand mostly," Owen said. "Work cattle drives, help with roundups, break horses when needed. I have been working for the Double Bar Ranch east of here for the past 3 months, but that job is ending soon. The owner is selling off most of his herd. After that, I do not know. Maybe I will head south for the winter, find work in Colorado or New Mexico." The thought of Owen leaving Rock Springs created an unexpected pang in Genevieve's chest, which was absurd given that she had only just met him. She pushed the feeling aside and focused on the landscape ahead. She could see the Henderson place now, a weathered wooden structure that might once have been painted white but was now the color of old bones. The roof sagged in places and the porch steps were rotting, but it had walls and a door that locked, and that was more than many people had. "That is it," she said, pointing. "The house with the broken fence." Owen guided Rusty off the main road onto the rutted track that led to the house. As they drew closer, Genevieve could hear coughing from inside, wet and painful, and her anxiety spiked. "Thomas," she said urgently. "I need to get to him." Owen brought Rusty to a stop in front of the house and dismounted smoothly, then reached up to help Genevieve down. His hand spanned her waist as he lifted her, setting her on her feet with care. She immediately hurried toward the door, fumbling with the latch in her haste. The interior of the house was dim and stifling, all the windows closed against the dust, and the smell of sickness hung heavy in the air. Thomas lay on the narrow bed they shared, his small face flushed with fever, his brown hair plastered to his forehead with sweat. He opened his eyes as Genevieve knelt beside him and tried to smile. "Ginny," he whispered, "you came back." "Of course I came back," Genevieve said, her throat tight. "I told you I would, and I brought medicine." She unwrapped the bottle with shaking hands, reading the label to determine the proper dose. "A spoonful for a child," it said. She found their one clean spoon and poured the brown liquid carefully, then helped Thomas sit up enough to swallow it. He made a face at the bitter taste, but did not complain. "Good boy," Genevieve murmured, easing him back onto the pillow. She dampened a rag in the basin of water on the rickety table and pressed it to his forehead, smoothing his hair back with her free hand. "The medicine will help. You are going to feel better soon, I promise." Thomas's gaze drifted past her to the doorway, and his eyes widened. "Who is that?" Genevieve turned to see Owen standing just inside the door, his hat in his hands, his expression carefully neutral as he took in the poverty of their living situation. She felt a flush of shame that this stranger was seeing how they lived, the single room with its rough plank floor, the table with one broken leg propped up on a chunk of wood, the few possessions they had left piled in a corner. But she lifted her chin and said, "This is Mr. Thatcher. He helped me get the medicine for you." "Thank you, sir," Thomas said, his voice a thin rasp. "That is very kind." "You are welcome, son," Owen said, stepping further into the room. "You concentrate on getting well now." Thomas nodded, his eyelids already drooping as exhaustion and the medicine took hold. Within minutes, his breathing had evened out into sleep, though it still wheezed and rattled in his chest. Genevieve stayed kneeling beside the bed for a long moment, one hand resting on her brother's bony shoulder, relief and fear and gratitude all warring inside her. Finally, she stood and turned to face Owen, who was still watching her with that same unreadable expression. "Thank you," she said again. "I do not know what I would have done if you had not been there. I do not know how I will ever repay you." "You do not owe me anything," Owen said firmly. "But I do have a question. When is the last time you ate something?" Genevieve blinked, thrown by the change of subject. "I had some bread this morning." "Bread," Owen repeated flatly. "Just bread. Genevieve, you look like a strong wind could blow you over. When is the last time you had a proper meal?" She wanted to lie, to claim that she was fine, that they were managing just fine on their own. But she was so tired of lying, so tired of pretending, so tired of being strong every single moment of every single day. "I do not remember," she admitted quietly. "A week, maybe more. I have been giving most of the food to Thomas. He needs it more than I do." Owen's jaw tightened, and for a moment anger flashed in those blue eyes, though she sensed it was not directed at her. "Do you have any food in the house at all?" "Some flour," Genevieve said. "A bit of lard, maybe half a tin of beans." Without another word, Owen strode to the door and went outside. Genevieve heard him moving around, heard Rusty snort, and then he was back inside carrying a burlap sack. He set it on the table and began unpacking it, revealing bread and cheese and dried beef, a tin of peaches, a bag of coffee, even a small jar of honey. "This was in my saddlebag," Owen said. "Supplies for the trail, but I can get more and you need it now." "I cannot take your food," Genevieve protested, even as her stomach cramped with desperate hunger at the sight of so much bounty. "You already paid for the medicine and you rode me home, and this is too much. It is all too much." "It is not too much," Owen said, his voice gentle but firm. "It is the bare minimum of what another human being deserves. Please, Genevieve, let me help." There was something in his eyes, some deep sincerity that broke through her defenses. Genevieve found herself nodding, tears spilling down her cheeks before she could stop them. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much." Owen crossed the space between them in 2 strides and somewhat awkwardly patted her shoulder. "It is going to be all right," he said. "You are going to get through this. Thomas is going to get well, and you are going to eat, and things are going to be all right." She wanted desperately to believe him. She let herself cry for just a moment, allowing the fear and exhaustion to leak out, and then she straightened and wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I am sorry," she said. "I do not usually fall apart like this." "You are entitled to fall apart," Owen said. "You have been carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders, but you do not have to carry it alone anymore, at least not today. Now sit down and eat something before you collapse." Genevieve obeyed, sinking onto one of the two mismatched chairs at the table. Owen cut bread and cheese with a knife from his belt, laying it out on a reasonably clean plate he found on the shelf. He poured water from the pitcher into their two tin cups and set one in front of her. "Eat slowly," he advised. "If you have not eaten much lately, you do not want to make yourself sick." She nodded and took a bite of bread and cheese, the flavors exploding across her tongue like something from a half-forgotten dream. She had to force herself to chew slowly, to swallow carefully, when every instinct screamed at her to devour everything in sight. Owen sat across from her and ate his own portion, his movements economical and efficient, the habits of a man used to eating in a saddle or beside a campfire. "Where are you from originally?" Genevieve asked between bites, hungry for conversation as much as for food, wanting to know more about this man who had appeared in her life like an answer to a prayer she had been too proud to speak aloud. "Texas," Owen said. "A little town south of San Antonio. My father tried his hand at cattle ranching, but he was never much good at it. We barely scraped by. When I was 12, we were moving the herd to new grazing land and Comanches attacked. They killed my father and two of the hired men. My mother moved us to San Antonio after that, tried to start over. Like I said, she worked herself to death. When she died, my sisters and I were on our own. I was the oldest, so I did what I could, took any work I could find. Eventually, I started hiring on with cattle drives, and I have been moving around ever since. That was 7 years ago. So you are 23, Genevieve calculated, and you have been on your own since you were 16. More or less, Owen agreed. My sisters were 14 and 13 when our mother died. I made sure they were settled before I left San Antonio, made sure they married men who would treat them right. Then I started drifting. It is a lonely life sometimes, but it is honest work and it pays reasonably well. I have seen a lot of country. Do you ever think about settling down? Genevieve asked, then immediately regretted the question. It was too personal, too forward. I am sorry, that is none of my business. It is a fair question, Owen said easily. And the answer is yes. Sometimes I think about it. But settling down requires having a place to settle and a reason to stay. I have not found either yet. They finished eating in companionable silence, and Genevieve felt strength flowing back into her limbs, her mind clearing from the fog of hunger and exhaustion. She checked on Thomas, who was sleeping peacefully, his breathing already sounding a bit less labored. The medicine was working. Relief made her dizzy. Owen stood and stretched, his joints popping. "I should head back to town before it gets dark," he said. "But I will come back tomorrow to check on you both if that is acceptable." "You do not have to do that," Genevieve said, even though the thought of seeing him again created a warm flutter in her chest. "I know I do not have to," Owen said. "I want to. Besides, I want to make sure Thomas is improving and that you are taking care of yourself. Promise me you will eat what I left for you." "I promise," Genevieve said. She walked him to the door, suddenly reluctant to see him go. "Mr. Thatcher, I truly cannot thank you enough. You saved us today." Owen put his hat back on and tipped it to her, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Just Owen is fine," he said. And you are welcome, Genevieve. Get some rest. I will see you tomorrow. She stood in the doorway and watched him mount Rusty and ride away, his silhouette dark against the golden afternoon light. Even after he disappeared from view, she stood there for a while, one hand pressed to her chest where her heart was beating faster than it had any right to. Something had changed today, something more significant than simply receiving help from a kind stranger. She felt it in her bones, that inexplicable certainty that her life had just shifted onto a new path. The following weeks unfolded like a dream. True to his word, Owen returned the next day and the day after that, and the day after that. He brought more food, a new blanket for Thomas, nails to fix the broken porch steps. He never asked permission, simply showed up and started making improvements or bringing supplies. At first Genevieve protested, insisted that he had done enough, that they would manage on their own. But Owen had a way of quietly overriding her objections without making her feel foolish or proud, and gradually she learned to accept his help with grace if not comfort. Thomas improved rapidly once he started taking the medicine regularly. His fever broke after 3 days, and the awful coughing fits became less frequent and less severe. Color returned to his cheeks, and he started eating proper meals again, his appetite returning with a vengeance that made Owen laugh. The cowboy was good with the boy, patient and kind, treating him like a younger brother rather than a burden. He taught Thomas to whittle, bringing him a small knife and a chunk of soft pine, showing him how to shape the wood into simple figures. "My father taught me this when I was about your age," Owen said, his large hands guiding Thomas's smaller ones. "It is a good skill to have. Keeps your hands busy and your mind calm." Thomas took to it immediately, spending hours carving rough approximations of horses and dogs and birds. He followed Owen around whenever the cowboy was at the house, peppering him with questions about cattle drives and gunfights and wild country. Owen answered them all with patience, though he edited the rougher parts of his experiences for young ears. Genevieve found herself watching Owen more than she should, noticing the way he moved with easy confidence, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the gentleness in his hands despite their obvious strength. She was not naive enough to mistake gratitude for something deeper, but she could not deny that her feelings were evolving beyond simple thankfulness. She looked forward to his visits with an anticipation that made her stomach flutter, found herself taking more care with her appearance in the mornings, brushing out her long brown hair and pinning it up neatly, wearing her least worn dress. One evening, about 2 weeks after their first meeting, Owen stayed late to help Genevieve repair a leak in the roof. The work took longer than expected, and by the time they climbed down from the roof, the sun was setting in a spectacular display of orange and purple and red. Genevieve made coffee on their little stove, and they sat on the newly repaired porch steps, tin cups warming their hands despite the lingering heat of the day. "Your job at the Double Bar Ranch," Genevieve said carefully. "You mentioned it was ending soon. When do you have to leave?" Owen was quiet for a moment, staring out at the darkening landscape. "End of the month," he finally said. "The owner is liquidating everything. Most of the hands have already moved on to other jobs. Where will you go?" Genevieve asked, trying to keep her voice neutral even though the thought of him leaving felt like a physical pain. "I do not know yet," Owen admitted. "I have been thinking about it a lot lately. There are always ranches hiring, especially down south. But I am not as eager to leave as I thought I would be." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, some acknowledgement of the connection that had been building over the past 2 weeks. Genevieve's breath caught in her throat. "Why is that?" she asked softly. Owen set down his coffee cup and turned to face her more fully. "I think you know why," he said, his voice low and serious. "I have been trying not to overstep, trying to keep this just about helping someone in need. But I would be lying if I said that was all it was. Genevieve, I care about you. More than I should, probably, given how recently we met. But I cannot help it. You are the strongest, bravest, most remarkable woman I have ever known, and the thought of riding away and never seeing you again makes me feel like I am making the worst mistake of my life." Genevieve's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "I care about you too," she admitted, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I tried not to, tried to tell myself it was just gratitude or relief or anything else, but it is not. Owen, when you are here, everything feels possible. When you are here, I do not feel alone anymore. I do not want you to leave." "Then I will not," Owen said simply. "I will find work here, something that will let me stay in Rock Springs. I do not know what yet, but I will figure it out, if that is what you want." "It is what I want," Genevieve said, and realized it was the truest thing she had said in months. Owen reached out and took her hand, his calloused fingers wrapping around hers. His touch sent warmth racing through her entire body, her skin suddenly too sensitive, her awareness narrowing to just this moment, just this man, just this feeling. "I should tell you," he said carefully, "that I do not have much to offer. I have some money saved, but not a lot. I do not have land or a house or any kind of security. All I have is my willingness to work hard and my promise that I will do everything in my power to take care of you and Thomas." "That is more than enough," Genevieve said. "Owen, you have already given us more than anyone else ever has. You gave us hope when I thought there was none left. You made me believe that things could be better. That is worth more than all the land or money in the world." They sat there on the porch as the stars came out, hands entwined, talking quietly about the future. They made plans, tentative at first and then with growing confidence. Owen would finish out his time at the double bar, collect his final wages, and then look for work in Rock Springs. There was a smaller ranch west of town that might be hiring, and if not, there were always odd jobs to be found. Genevieve would continue taking in laundry, and together they would pool their resources, scraping by until they could build something better. It was not a grand romance of the kind Genevieve had read about in the few books she had managed to get her hands on over the years. There were no dramatic declarations or sweeping gestures, but there was something deeper and more real in Owen's quiet determination, in his steady presence, in the way he looked at her like she was someone worth fighting for. And for Genevieve, who had spent so long feeling invisible and powerless, that meant everything. The remainder of August passed in a blur of work and stolen moments together. Owen finished his job at the double bar and, true to his word, found work at the smaller Carter Ranch west of Rock Springs. The pay was modest but steady, and it allowed him to visit Genevieve and Thomas several times a week. He started contributing to their household expenses, and though Genevieve initially protested, Owen pointed out that if they were building a future together, then that future started now, not some arbitrary point down the line when everything was perfect. Thomas adored Owen and made no secret of his hope that the cowboy would become a permanent part of their lives. "Are you going to marry Ginny?" he asked one evening with the blunt curiosity of childhood, and Genevieve nearly choked on her coffee while Owen laughed. "That is the plan if she will have me," Owen said, winking at Genevieve over Thomas's head. "But we are taking things one step at a time." "You should marry soon," Thomas advised seriously. "So we can be a proper family. I would like to have a brother." "Or a sister, I suppose, though a brother would be better." "Thomas," Genevieve scolded, her face burning with embarrassment. "That is quite enough." But Owen just grinned and ruffled Thomas's hair. "I will keep that in mind," he said. That night, after Thomas had fallen asleep, Owen and Genevieve sat outside under the vast Wyoming sky, the kind of clear night where you could see the Milky Way stretched out like spilled milk across the darkness. Owen had his arm around Genevieve's shoulders, and she leaned against him, feeling safe and content in a way she had not felt since her parents died. "He is right, you know," Owen said quietly, "about getting married. Not about the timing necessarily, but about the wanting. Genevieve, I know we have not known each other long, but I am certain about this, about us. I want to marry you. I want to make this official and real, but I understand if you need more time." Genevieve tilted her head to look up at him, seeing the sincerity in his face, the vulnerability in his eyes. "I do not need more time," she said. "I know my own heart, Owen. I want to marry you too. I want the life we talked about, the future we are building. I want all of it with you." Owen's answering smile was radiant, transforming his usually serious face into something younger and lighter. He cupped her cheek with one hand, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. "May I kiss you?" he asked, his voice husky. "Yes," Genevieve breathed, and then his lips were on hers, soft and warm and perfect. The kiss was gentle at first, almost tentative, as though Owen was afraid of overwhelming her. But when Genevieve pressed closer, her hands coming up to rest on his chest, he deepened the kiss, one arm wrapping around her waist to pull her against him. Heat flooded through her, desire and tenderness and joy all tangled together until she could not separate one from the other. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Owen rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said simply. "I think I started falling in love with you the moment I saw you trying to steal that medicine, looking so fierce and terrified and determined all at once." "I love you too," Genevieve said, the words easy and right. "I did not think I would ever feel this way about anyone. I thought I would just survive, just get through each day, but you made me want more. You made me believe I could have more." They sat there for a long time, wrapped up in each other, talking about everything and nothing. They decided to get married in September, a simple ceremony at the church in Rock Springs with just Thomas and whoever Owen wanted to invite as witnesses. They could not afford anything elaborate, but Genevieve found she did not care. All she wanted was to stand up in front of God and the world and declare that she and Owen were choosing each other, that they were building something new and strong from the ruins of their separate pasts. September arrived with cooler temperatures and the first hint of autumn gold in the cottonwoods along the creek. Owen moved his few possessions into the Henderson place, and though the house was crowded with 3 people instead of 2, no one minded. It felt right, having him there. Thomas thrived with a male figure in his life, someone to look up to and learn from. And Genevieve discovered that sharing her burdens made them infinitely lighter. They were married on a bright Saturday afternoon, the 15th of September, in the small wooden church at the edge of Rock Springs. Genevieve wore the best dress she owned, a simple blue cotton that she had painstakingly mended and pressed until it looked almost new. Owen wore clean denim and a white shirt, his hair slicked back, his boots polished to a shine. Thomas stood as Owen's best man, so proud and important-looking that Genevieve had to blink back tears. The ceremony was short and simple, conducted by a circuit preacher who happened to be passing through town. They exchanged simple gold bands that Owen had purchased with his savings, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Owen kissed Genevieve with such tenderness that she felt her heart might burst from sheer happiness. Thomas cheered, and a handful of other people who had wandered into the church for the service applauded politely. Afterward they walked back to their house, now officially their family home, and celebrated with a special dinner that Genevieve had prepared. There was roasted chicken, a luxury they could barely afford, and potatoes and gravy, and even a pie made with the last of the summer berries. They ate until they were stuffed, laughing and talking, and Thomas fell asleep at the table, worn out from excitement. Owen carried the boy to the bed in the corner, tucking him in with care, and then he and Genevieve were alone. They had hung a blanket from the rafters to create a small amount of privacy, sectioning off the other corner of the room where they had set up their own sleeping area. It was not much, but it was theirs. Genevieve felt suddenly nervous as Owen turned to face her, his eyes dark and warm. "Hello, Mrs. Thatcher," he said softly. "Hello, Mr. Thatcher," she replied, her voice shaking slightly. Owen closed the distance between them and took her hands in his. "Are you all right?" he asked. "We do not have to do anything tonight if you are not ready. We have all the time in the world." "I am ready," Genevieve said, and it was true. She trusted Owen completely, and she wanted this, wanted to truly become his wife in every sense of the word. "I am just a little nervous. I have never done this before." "Neither have I," Owen admitted, which surprised her. "I always figured I would wait until I was married, and I am a man of my word, so we will figure it out together." The honesty of his words eased Genevieve's anxiety, and she smiled up at him. "Together," she agreed. Owen kissed her, slow and deep, his hands gentle as they moved to the buttons at the back of her dress. Genevieve's fingers trembled as she worked at the buttons of his shirt, but soon they were undressing each other, clothes falling away to reveal skin and vulnerability and trust. Owen led her to their makeshift bed, nothing more than a mattress on the floor covered with quilts, but it felt like the most luxurious place in the world. What followed was tentative and tender, awkward in places as they learned each other's bodies, but filled with such love and care that the awkwardness did not matter. Owen was patient and attentive, constantly checking to make sure Genevieve was comfortable, that he was not hurting her. And Genevieve felt safe in his arms, protected and cherished, even as the initial discomfort gave way to pleasure and connection. Afterward they lay tangled together, Genevieve's head on Owen's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Owen replied, his arms tightening around her. "More than I thought it was possible to love anyone. You and Thomas, you are my family now, my whole world." They fell asleep like that, wrapped up in each other, and Genevieve's last thought before sleep claimed her was that she had never felt so completely, utterly happy. The months that followed were not easy, but they were good. Owen worked long hours at the Carter Ranch, coming home exhausted and saddle-sore, but always with a smile for his wife and brother-in-law. Genevieve continued taking in laundry, her reputation for quality work spreading until she had more business than she could handle. Together, they saved every penny they could, building toward a future that seemed more attainable with each passing week. Thomas started attending the school in Rock Springs, walking the 3 miles each way with a group of other children from the surrounding homesteads. He was bright and eager to learn, and his teacher reported that he was doing exceptionally well, particularly in mathematics and rating. Owen helped him with his lessons in the evenings, and Genevieve felt a swell of pride watching her little brother blossom under Owen's guidance and the stability of their new life. Winter arrived early that year, cold and harsh even by Wyoming standards. Snow fell in thick blankets, transforming the landscape into a world of white silence. Owen and Genevieve worked together to winterize the house, stuffing rags into the gaps in the walls, stockpiling firewood, laying in supplies. The close quarters during the long winter months could have been stifling, but instead Genevieve found she treasured the forced intimacy. The long evenings spent by the fire with Owen reading aloud while she mended, or Thomas worked on his lessons. It was during one of those quiet evenings in January that Genevieve realized she had not had her monthly courses in some time. She counted backward, once and then again to be sure, and felt her heart begin to race. She waited until Thomas was asleep before pulling Owen aside, whispering her suspicion to him in the darkness. Owen's reaction was everything she could have hoped for. His face lit up with wonder and joy, and he pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "A baby," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Genevieve, we are going to have a baby. We cannot be completely certain yet," she cautioned, but she was smiling so hard her cheeks hurt. "But all the signs point to it." "When?" Owen asked. "If I am right about the timing, probably sometime in late summer or early fall," Genevieve calculated. "August or September, maybe." They told Thomas a few weeks later, once they were more certain. The boy's reaction was predictably enthusiastic. "I am going to be an uncle," he crowed, dancing around the small house. "No, wait, a brother. A big brother. This is even better than having Owen as a brother-in-law." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, for which Genevieve was deeply grateful. She had heard horror stories from other women about sickness and complications, but aside from some fatigue in the early months, she felt remarkably well. Owen was attentive to the point of being overprotective, trying to prevent her from doing any heavy work, but Genevieve firmly drew the line at being treated like an invalid. She was pregnant, not incapacitated, and there was work to be done. As winter gave way to spring and spring to summer, Genevieve's belly swelled with their growing child. She felt the baby move for the first time in April, a flutter like butterfly wings against the inside of her womb, and she had grabbed Owen's hand and pressed it to her stomach, so he could feel it too. The look of awe on his face was something she would treasure forever. They began making preparations for the baby's arrival. Owen built a cradle from scrap wood, sanding it smooth and painting it a cheerful yellow. Genevieve sewed tiny clothes from fabric she purchased with money she had been saving, her heart full at the thought of their child wearing them. Thomas insisted on contributing too, carving a small wooden horse as a gift for his future niece or nephew. The baby came on a sweltering August afternoon, exactly 11 months after the day Owen had caught Genevieve stealing medicine. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the afternoon and into the night, and there were moments when Genevieve thought she might die from the pain. But Owen stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead with cool cloths, whispering encouragement and love. Finally, as the first light of dawn broke over the Wyoming landscape, their son came into the world with a lusty cry that announced his arrival to anyone within hearing distance. He was perfect, with a shock of dark hair and his father's blue eyes, and when the midwife placed him in Genevieve's arms, she felt a surge of love so intense it was almost painful. "He is beautiful," Owen said, his voice rough with emotion. He reached out a tentative finger to touch the baby's tiny hand, and the infant's fingers curled around it instinctively. "He is absolutely perfect. What should we name him?" Genevieve asked, too exhausted to think clearly but too exhilarated to sleep. They had discussed names endlessly over the past months, running through every option they could think of, but nothing had felt quite right. Now, looking down at their son's scrunched-up face, Genevieve suddenly knew. "What about Matthew?" she suggested. "It means gift of God, and that is what he is. A gift." "Matthew Thatcher," Owen said, testing the name. "I like it. Matthew Owen Thatcher. Perfect," Genevieve agreed. Thomas was allowed in to meet his nephew once Genevieve had been cleaned up and settled. The boy approached the bed with uncharacteristic caution, his eyes wide as he stared at the tiny bundle in his sister's arms. "He is so small," he whispered, clearly awed. "All babies are small," Genevieve said with a tired laugh. "But he will grow. Would you like to hold him?" Thomas nodded eagerly, and Owen helped him settle into the chair by the bed, showing him how to support the baby's head. Matthew squirmed and made small, mewling sounds, but he did not cry. Thomas looked up at Genevieve with such wonder on his face that she felt tears prick her eyes. "I am going to teach him everything," Thomas declared. "How to whittle and read and do sums. And when he is bigger, I will teach him to ride horses and throw a rope, like Owen taught me." "I am sure he will appreciate that," Owen said, his hand resting on Thomas's shoulder. The days that followed were a blur of feedings and diaper changes and precious little sleep, but Genevieve had never been happier. Matthew was a good baby, healthy and strong, nursing enthusiastically and sleeping in relatively long stretches. Owen proved to be a natural father, handling his son with surprising confidence despite his earlier nervousness. He would walk the floor with Matthew in the middle of the night when the baby was fussy, singing old trail songs in his deep voice until the infant settled. As summer faded into autumn, their little family found its rhythm. Owen continued working at the Carter Ranch, bringing home stories and his wages. Genevieve had to put aside her laundry work temporarily while she recovered and adjusted to motherhood, but several of her regular customers promised to wait for her return. Thomas started back at school, now an excited big brother who brought his friends home to meet the baby. One evening in October, as they all sat around the dinner table, Matthew sleeping peacefully in his cradle nearby, Owen cleared his throat. "I have some news," he announced. "Mr. Carter approached me today with an offer. He is getting older and his sons are not interested in ranching. He wants to start bringing on a partner, someone who could eventually take over the operation. He offered me the position." Genevieve's fork clattered to her plate. "Owen, that is incredible. What did you say?" "I said I needed to talk to my wife first," Owen said, his eyes twinkling. "But I am inclined to say yes. It would mean more responsibility, longer hours at first, but it would also mean better pay, a stake in something real. Eventually, if things work out, we could own part of the ranch, maybe even buy land of our own someday." "You should absolutely say yes," Genevieve said firmly. "This is the opportunity we have been working toward. This is how we build the future we want for our children." "Children?" Owen asked, his eyebrows rising. "Plural? Well, we are not stopping at one, are we?" Genevieve said, laughing at his expression. "Matthew needs brothers and sisters." "One thing at a time," Owen said, but he was grinning. "Let me make partner first, then we can discuss expanding the family further." Thomas, who had been following the conversation with interest, piped up. "Does this mean we will be rich?" "Not rich," Owen corrected. "But comfortable eventually. It means we will not have to worry so much about money, that we can save for the future. It means stability." "I think that sounds very good," Thomas said seriously. "Stability is important." Owen accepted Mr. Carter's offer and, true to his word, threw himself into learning every aspect of running the ranch. He worked harder than ever, but the work had purpose and direction now. He was not just earning wages, he was building something, creating a legacy for his family. Genevieve supported him however she could, managing their household with increasing efficiency, slowly building back up her laundry business as Matthew grew more independent. The years unfolded in a progression of seasons and milestones. Matthew took his first steps the following spring, lurching across the room into Owen's waiting arms. Thomas graduated from the Rock Springs School and started working part-time at the general store, saving money for his own future. And in the fall of 1887, Genevieve gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Sarah, who had her mother's brown hair and her father's stubborn chin. 2 years later, another son arrived, James, and then 2 years after that, a second daughter, Elizabeth. Each pregnancy, each birth, each new child felt like a miracle to Genevieve, who had once thought she would never have this kind of life. Their house, which they had eventually been able to purchase outright with Owen's increased earnings, rang with the sounds of children laughing and playing, a far cry from the desperate silence that had filled it that August day in 1885. Owen did eventually become a full partner in the Carter Ranch, and when old Mr. Carter passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1892, he left his share of the ranch to Owen in his will, his own sons having long since moved to California to pursue other interests. Suddenly, Owen and Genevieve found themselves landowners, proprietors of one of the more successful ranches in the region. Thomas, now a young man of 19, came to work at the ranch as well, proving himself to be every bit as capable and hardworking as his brother-in-law. He had grown tall and strong, with an easy smile and a kind heart that made him popular among the other ranch hands and in town. Genevieve knew it was only a matter of time before some smart young woman caught his eye, and she gained a sister-in-law to go with the family they had built. One evening in the summer of 1895, 10 years almost to the day since Owen had caught Genevieve stealing medicine, they sat together on the porch of their much-improved house, watching their children play in the yard as the sun set. Matthew, now 9, was teaching 6-year-old Sarah how to rope a fence post, while James, age 4, toddled after them demanding his turn. Baby Elizabeth napped in her cradle inside, her soft breathing audible through the open window. "You ever think about that day?" Genevieve asked softly, leaning her head on Owen's shoulder. "The day we met, all the time," Owen admitted. "I think about how close I came to not being in that store at that exact moment. How different our lives would be if I had not seen you, or if I had decided it was not my business, or any number of other small choices that could have changed everything. I think about how desperate I was," Genevieve said. "How certain I was that there was no way out, no hope left. And then you appeared like something out of a story. You saved us, Owen. You saved Thomas and you saved me." "We saved each other," Owen corrected gently. "You gave me a reason to stop drifting, a purpose beyond just surviving from one day to the next. You gave me a family, a home, a life worth living. I was the one who was lost, Genevieve, until I found you." She turned to look at him, this man who had walked into her life when she needed him most and had stayed by her side ever since. His face was older now, lined by sun and wind and hard work, but still handsome, still dear. "I love you," she said, as she had said countless times over the years, but the words never lost their power or their truth. "I love you too," Owen replied, kissing her softly. "More every day, which I would not have thought possible, but it is true." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching their children and counting their blessings. The ranch was thriving, their family was healthy and happy, and the desperate poverty that had once defined their lives was now just a distant memory. They had built something real and lasting from nothing more than determination and love and the chance encounter in a general store. Thomas came riding up as the last light faded from the sky, dusty and tired from a day of work but grinning broadly. "Supper ready," he called. "I could eat a horse." "It is ready," Genevieve confirmed, rising to call the children inside. "And you are not eating any horses, we need them for work." The family gathered around the large dining table that Owen had built himself, crowding into chairs and passing plates, and talking over each other in the way of families everywhere. This was the life Genevieve had dreamed of during those dark days when she thought she would lose Thomas, when she thought she would be alone forever. This noise and chaos and love, this sense of belonging and security, this knowledge that she was part of something bigger than herself. After dinner, once the children were in bed and Thomas had headed to the bunkhouse he shared with the other ranch hands, Owen and Genevieve stood in the doorway of their bedroom, looking in on their sleeping children. Matthew and James shared a room now, both boys sprawled in their beds in the boneless way of sleeping children. Sarah and Elizabeth were in the nursery, Sarah clutching her favorite doll and Elizabeth sucking her thumb in her sleep. "We did all right, did we not?" Owen said quietly, his arm around Genevieve's waist. "We did more than all right," Genevieve replied. "We did wonderfully. We built a life, Owen, a real, solid, beautiful life, and it all started with you catching me trying to steal medicine and choosing kindness instead of judgment." "Best decision I ever made," Owen said. "Well, that and asking you to marry me, and naming Matthew instead of the terrible suggestions you kept coming up with." Genevieve laughed and elbowed him gently in the ribs. "My suggestions were not terrible, they were creative." "They were terrible," Owen insisted, but he was smiling. "Remember when you wanted to name him Obadiah? Poor kid would have been mocked his entire life." "Obadiah is a perfectly respectable biblical name," Genevieve protested, but she was laughing too. They closed the door on their sleeping children and retired to their own room, which was larger and more comfortable than the corner of a one-room shack they had started out in. They had a real bed now, with a proper frame and mattress and curtains on the windows and a rug on the floor. Small luxuries that would mean nothing to the wealthy, but meant everything to people who remembered what it was like to have nothing. That night, wrapped in each other's arms, Genevieve reflected on the journey that had brought them here. It had not been easy, and there had been times when she thought they would not make it, when money was tight or illness struck or some other disaster threatened to undo all their hard work. But they had persevered together, and they had built something that would last long after they were gone. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new challenges and new joys. The children grew, each developing their own personalities and interests. Matthew proved to have a gift with horses, able to calm even the most fractious animal. Sarah was bookish and dreamy, always with her nose in whatever reading material she could get her hands on. James was the adventurer, constantly getting into scrapes and exploring every corner of the ranch. And Elizabeth, the baby, was sweet-natured and affectionate, the one who could always make everyone laugh. Thomas eventually did meet a young woman, the daughter of a merchant in Rock Springs, and married her in a ceremony that reminded Genevieve powerfully of her own wedding years before. She and Owen gave the couple a piece of land from their ranch as a wedding present, and Thomas built a house there, establishing his own homestead while still working the ranch with Owen. As the new century dawned, the Thatcher family was well established in Rock Springs and the surrounding area. Owen had become a respected businessman and landowner, known for his fairness and his willingness to help those in need, perhaps remembering his own humble beginnings. Genevieve had become something of a pillar of the community, organizing charitable efforts and helping other struggling families the way they had once been helped. On a warm afternoon in June of 1905, Owen and Genevieve celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary with a gathering of family and friends. Their children, now ranging in age from 15 to 19, had organized the party, decorating the house and preparing food and inviting everyone their parents had ever helped or befriended. The house was full of people and laughter, of shared stories and genuine affection. At one point, Owen pulled Genevieve aside, leading her away from the party to the quiet of the porch where they had spent so many evenings over the years. The sun was setting in shades of gold and pink, painting the landscape in soft light. 20 years, Owen said, shaking his head in wonder. Sometimes it feels like we just got married yesterday, and sometimes it feels like we have been together forever. I know what you mean, Genevieve said. She took his hand, their fingers interlacing automatically after so many years of the gesture. I cannot imagine my life without you, Owen. I do not want to imagine it. You will never have to, Owen promised. I intend to stick around for a very long time. We have grandchildren to spoil, after all. Matthew has been courting that girl from church, and I expect we will have a wedding announcement before the year is out. Sarah, too, Genevieve said. She thinks I have not noticed, but she has been writing letters to that young teacher who moved here from Denver. I expect something will come of that. Our children are grown, Owen said, a note of wistfulness in his voice. When did that happen? Gradually and then all at once, Genevieve replied. But that is the way of things. Children grow up and build their own lives just as we built ours, and we will always be here for them just as they will be here for us. They stood together in the fading light, listening to the sounds of celebration from inside the house, feeling the satisfaction of a life well lived and a love that had not only endured but deepened with time. They had started with nothing but hope and determination and a chance meeting that changed everything. They had faced every challenge together, celebrated every triumph together, built a family and a legacy together. No regrets? Owen asked softly. Not a single one, Genevieve replied with absolute certainty. Only that I did not meet you sooner, Owen said. But I suppose the timing was perfect in its own way. We found each other exactly when we needed to. We did, Genevieve agreed. She turned to face him, looking up into eyes that were still as blue and kind as they had been that day in Morrison's General Store 20 years ago. Thank you, Owen, for everything. For seeing me when I was invisible, for helping me when I was desperate, for loving me when I thought I was unlovable. Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for letting me, Owen replied. Thank you for trusting me, for building this life with me, for giving me a family and a purpose and more happiness than I thought one person could contain. I would choose you 1,000 times over, Genevieve. 1,000,000 times. They kissed then, long and sweet, a reaffirmation of all the promises they had made and kept over 20 years of marriage. When they finally pulled apart, they were both smiling, their faces reflecting the love and contentment that filled their hearts. The party continued late into the evening, and by the time the last guest had departed, Owen and Genevieve were exhausted but happy. Their children cleaned up the debris of the celebration, shooing their parents off to bed with affectionate insistence. Owen and Genevieve climbed the stairs to their bedroom, their footsteps in sync after years of walking side by side. As they lay in bed that night, Genevieve reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her from a desperate girl stealing medicine to save her brother to a woman surrounded by love and security. She thought about all the moments, both small and large, that had shaped their life together. The first kiss under the stars, the births of their children, the quiet evenings on the porch, the challenges overcome and the dreams realized. "What are you thinking about?" Owen murmured, his arm tightening around her. "Everything," Genevieve replied. "Our whole life together, how lucky we are. How grateful I am for that day in the store, even though I was terrified at the time. If you had not been there, if you had not cared enough to help a stranger, none of this would exist. Our children would not exist. This life we built would not exist." "I was the lucky one," Owen insisted. "I was drifting, Genevieve, living day to day with no real purpose. You gave me anchor. You made me want to be better, to build something lasting. You made me want to settle down and put down roots. I needed you just as much as you needed me, maybe more." "We needed each other," Genevieve said. And we found each other at exactly the right time. I believe that. I believe we were meant to meet that day, meant to build this life together." "I believe that too," Owen said. They fell asleep that way, wrapped in each other's arms, content and secure in the knowledge that they had built something real and lasting, something that would endure long after they were gone. Their love story had started with a desperate act and a kind gesture, and it had grown into something beautiful and enduring, a testament to the power of compassion and the possibility of redemption and the transformative nature of love. In the years that followed, the Thatcher family continued to grow and thrive. Matthew did indeed marry his sweetheart, and within a year presented Owen and Genevieve with their first grandchild, a boy they named Owen Thomas in honor of his grandfather and great-uncle. Sarah married her teacher and moved to Denver, though she visited frequently and maintained close ties with the family. James followed in his father's footsteps, taking over more and more of the ranch operations as Owen grew older. And Elizabeth, the youngest, surprised everyone by announcing her intention to become a nurse, determined to help others the way her family had once been helped. Thomas and his wife had 3 children of their own, building their homestead into a prosperous farm. He remained Owen's closest friend and most trusted partner. The bond between them forged in those early days when they were just a desperate widow and an orphaned boy, and a drifting cowboy trying to cobble together a family from the remnants of their shattered lives. As Owen and Genevieve aged, they took great joy in their grandchildren, spoiling them with stories and sweets and unconditional love. They told the children about the old days, about how their grandparents had met, about the struggles and triumphs that had shaped their family. The story of how Owen caught Genevieve stealing medicine became a family legend, told and retold at gatherings, a reminder of where they had come from and what they had overcome. On a cool September evening in 1915, 30 years after that fateful day in Morrison's General Store, Owen and Genevieve sat on their porch as they had done countless times over the decades. They were older now, both in their 50s, their hair streaked with gray, their faces lined by time and weather. But their love for each other had not diminished. If anything, it had grown stronger, tempered by years of partnership and tested by challenges overcome together. 30 years, Genevieve marveled, shaking her head. It does not seem possible that it has been so long. 30 of the best years of my life, Owen said. Every single one of them spent with you was a gift. They watched the sun set over their land, over the ranch they had built together, over the legacy they were leaving for their children and grandchildren. In the distance, they could see Matthew working with a young horse in the corral, could hear Sarah's children playing in the yard of the guest house where she was staying during her visit, could smell the dinner that Elizabeth was preparing in the kitchen. This was what they had built from nothing. This family, this land, this love. It had started with a desperate act and a kind gesture, and it had grown into something beyond anything either of them could have imagined in those early days. They had taken their broken pieces and fitted them together, creating something whole and beautiful and lasting. "I love you," Genevieve said, the words as true and vital as they had been the first time she spoke them. "I love you too," Owen replied, pulling her close. "Always have, always will." As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Owen and Genevieve sat together in peaceful contentment, surrounded by the evidence of a life well lived and a love that had conquered every obstacle. They had started with nothing but hope in each other, and they had built an empire of love and family that would endure for generations. Their story, which began with a cowboy catching a desperate girl stealing medicine and choosing to help rather than judge, had become a testament to the transformative power of compassion and the enduring strength of love. It was a story of redemption and hope, of two broken people finding wholeness in each other, of a family forged not just by blood but by choice and commitment and unwavering dedication to one another. And as the years continued to pass, as children became parents and parents became grandparents, the Thatcher family carried forward the legacy that Owen and Genevieve had established. They remembered where they came from, they helped those in need, and they loved fiercely and without reservation, just as Owen and Genevieve had taught them. The ranch prospered under the care of multiple generations, the land passing from father to son, mother to daughter, each generation adding their own contributions while honoring the foundation laid by Owen and Genevieve. The house was expanded and improved, but the original structure remained at its heart, a reminder of humble beginnings and the determination required to overcome adversity. In 1925, Owen and Genevieve celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary surrounded by children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. The party was a grand affair, attended by what seemed like half of Rock Springs and the surrounding areas. People came from miles around to honor the couple who had become pillars of their community, known for their generosity, their integrity, and their enduring love for one another. During the celebration, Matthew stood to give a toast, his voice carrying across the crowded room. "To my parents," he said, raising his glass, "who taught us that love is not just a feeling but an action, a choice you make every single day. Who showed us that family is worth fighting for, that hard work and determination can overcome any obstacle, and that kindness to strangers can change the course of lives. Everything we have, everything we are, we owe to their example." To Owen and Genevieve Thatcher, the finest people I have ever known. The room erupted in applause and cheers, and Owen and Genevieve stood to acknowledge the tribute, their hands clasped together as they had been for 40 years. Genevieve felt tears streaming down her face, but they were tears of joy and gratitude, of overwhelming happiness at the realization that they had not just survived but thrived, that they had built something beautiful and lasting from the ashes of their early desperation. As the years advanced and they grew older still, Owen and Genevieve began to slow down, leaving more of the ranch operations to Matthew and James while they enjoyed a well-earned rest. They spent their days in gentle pursuits, tending a garden, reading, spending time with grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and always, always spending time together. They were rarely apart, having discovered long ago that they simply preferred each other's company to anyone else's. On quiet evenings they would still sit on their porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors, talking about the day's events, or reminiscing about the past, or simply sitting in comfortable silence. They had reached that point in a long marriage where words were often unnecessary, where a look or a touch could communicate volumes. One such evening, when Owen was 68 and Genevieve 66, they sat as they had done thousands of times before, watching the land they loved under the endless Wyoming sky. Owen reached over and took Genevieve's hand, and she intertwined her fingers with his automatically, the gesture so familiar it was like breathing. "You remember," Owen said softly, "the first night we sat here together. When I told you I was going to stay in Rock Springs, that I did not want to leave you." "I remember," Genevieve said. "I was so afraid to hope that you meant it, so afraid that you would leave and I would be alone again. But you stayed. You always stayed." "Best decision I ever made," Owen said, as he had said so many times over the years. "Marrying you, building this life with you, raising our family together. If I could go back and do it all again, I would not change a single thing." "Neither would I," Genevieve agreed. Well, maybe I would have packed a better lunch that day you took us on that picnic and everything got rained on. But other than that, not a single thing." Owen laughed, the sound warm and familiar. "That was a disaster, was it not? We were soaked to the bone." "But we laughed about it," Genevieve reminded him. "We made it an adventure instead of a tragedy. That is what we have always done, Owen. We faced whatever came and we faced it together and we found joy even in the difficult moments." "We did," Owen agreed. "We really did." They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the stars emerge one by one. Finally, Owen spoke again, his voice thoughtful. "I want you to know something, Genevieve. When my time comes, whenever that is, I will go with no regrets. I will have lived a full life, a good life, a life rich with love and purpose, and that is entirely because of you. You made my life worth living." "Owen," Genevieve protested, her voice catching, "do not talk like that. We have years yet." "I hope so," Owen said. "But even if we do, I wanted to say it now, when I can say it clearly and you can hear it and know that I mean every word. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Genevieve Thatcher. You and our family. Everything good in my life came from you." "And you were the best thing that ever happened to me," Genevieve said, tears sliding down her cheeks. "You saved me, Owen. You saved Thomas and you saved me, and you gave us a life beyond anything I could have imagined. I would have died young and alone if not for you. Instead, I have lived a long, full, beautiful life. I have been loved and I have loved, and that is the greatest gift anyone could receive." They held each other as the night deepened around them, two people who had found each other against all odds and had built something extraordinary together. Their love story had not been dramatic or grandiose, but it had been real and deep and lasting, and that was worth more than all the grand gestures in the world. In the spring of 1930, when Owen was 73 and Genevieve 71, Owen took ill with pneumonia. Despite the best efforts of doctors and the devoted care of his family, he did not recover. He passed away peacefully one April morning, surrounded by Genevieve and their children, his last words a whispered declaration of love for his wife of 45 years. Genevieve was devastated by the loss, as was the entire family and community. Owen had been a fixture in Rock Springs for decades, known and respected by all. His funeral was attended by hundreds of people, a testament to the impact he had made on countless lives through his kindness and generosity. In the months that followed, Genevieve grieved deeply, missing Owen with an ache that never fully subsided. But she was surrounded by love and support, by children and grandchildren who rallied around her, who made sure she was never alone unless she wanted to be. And gradually, she found a way to keep living, to honor Owen's memory by continuing the work they had started together. She lived for another 8 years, years filled with great-grandchildren and community service, and the satisfaction of seeing the legacy she and Owen had built continue to flourish. She told stories of Owen to anyone who would listen, keeping his memory alive through words and remembrance. And every evening, weather permitting, she sat on the porch where they had spent so many hours together, feeling his presence beside her even though he was gone. When Genevieve passed away peacefully in her sleep in the summer of 1938, at the age of 79, it was said by many that she had simply decided it was time to be reunited with Owen. She was laid to rest beside him in the Rock Springs Cemetery, their graves marked by a simple stone that bore both their names and the inscription, "Together always." Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren continued to live on the ranch, continuing to build on the foundation Owen and Genevieve had laid. The story of how they met, of the cowboy who caught a desperate girl stealing medicine and chose compassion over judgment, was passed down through generations, becoming a cherished family history that reminded each new generation where they came from and what values they were meant to uphold. The ranch itself prospered through the decades, surviving economic depressions and droughts and all the other challenges that time threw at it. It remained in the Thatcher family, a living monument to the love and determination of the two people who had started it all with nothing but hope and each other. And though Owen and Genevieve were gone, their love story lived on, not just in the family they created but in the countless lives they touched, the people they helped, the legacy of kindness and compassion they left behind. They had taken a moment of desperation and transformed it into something beautiful and enduring, proving that love and kindness could triumph over any adversity, that two broken people could create something whole and lasting together. Their story began with a theft and an act of mercy, and it ended with a legacy of love that would be remembered for generations. It was a testament to the power of choosing compassion, of seeing the person behind the desperate act, of offering help instead of judgment. Owen could have turned Genevieve in that day in Morrison's general store. He could have walked away, decided it was not his problem, gone on with his drifting life. But he had chosen to help, and that single choice had changed everything, not just for Genevieve and Thomas but for countless others whose lives were touched by the family they built. In the end, theirs was a simple story of two people who found each other when they needed each other most, who chose to build a life together despite having nothing to build it from, who loved each other through every challenge and celebrated every triumph side by side. It was a story of redemption and hope, of second chances and the transformative power of love. And it was a story that, though it ended with their passing, would live on forever in the hearts and memories of those who came after them. The Thatcher Ranch still stands today, a sprawling operation run by the fifth and sixth generations of Owen and Genevieve's descendants. The original house, much expanded and modernized, remains at the center of the property, a tangible connection to the couple who started it all. And on summer evenings, family members still gather on the porch, telling stories of Owen and Genevieve, keeping their memory alive, ensuring that their legacy of love and compassion continues to inspire. Because in the end, that is what matters. Not the wealth accumulated or the land acquired, but the love shared and the lives touched and the values passed down. Owen and Genevieve understood that, lived that, and created something that transcended their own lives. They started with nothing but each other, and they built an empire of love that would last forever. All because a cowboy saw a desperate girl stealing medicine and chose to help her instead of condemn her. That single act of kindness on a hot August day in 1885 had rippled outward through time, changing lives and creating possibilities that would never have existed otherwise. It was proof that one person can make a difference, that one choice can change everything, that love and compassion can triumph over any adversity. And somewhere, perhaps, Owen and Genevieve are together still, looking down on the family they created, proud of the legacy they left, content in the knowledge that their love story, which began so humbly and grew so magnificently, will continue to inspire and guide those who come after them for generations yet to come. Their story is complete, their circle closed, their happily ever after achieved not just for themselves but for the countless descendants who carry their legacy forward. This is their story, the story of the cowboy who caught a girl stealing medicine and chose love over judgment, compassion over condemnation, and in doing so, created something beautiful and lasting that would echo through the ages. It is a story of hope fulfilled, of love realized, of a life well lived together. And it is a story that, like all the best love stories, never truly ends, but lives on in the hearts of those who hear it and are inspired to choose love, to offer compassion, to believe that even in the darkest moments, redemption and hope and happily ever after are possible.